welcoming to the stage, Umatana Balasingham.
This one? Thank you. So when I was 16, I desperately wanted to be the editor of my school magazine. And I campaigned really hard. I made my own posters, I recruited my friends. I even took a job at a newspaper because I figured that would establish my credibility as a person that could be the school editor. And it would obviously make me the obvious choice. And the result was that I got assistant editor, which is, let's be honest, the consolation prize, which basically says, nice try, but not quite. So the girl that got the top job, she didn't campaign as hard as I did, but she knew all the teachers that was going to vote for this position. And that was my first real lesson in politics. So the next year, I played the game differently. I figured out who were the teachers that were going to make these decisions. I quietly showed them my work, my writings. I made things easier for them, volunteered for projects that they were in, and, made myself useful in quiet ways. So guess what? I got the editor job. And guess who I chose as assistant editor? My best friend. Because if I was going to be political, I was going to be loyal as well. And so that experience taught me something, which I've seen play out again and again in boardrooms. The person with the best resume doesn't always get the role, it's the best relationships. And so it's not always fair, but it's real. So that's one of the biggest lessons I've had over 31 years. And it's something that I want to talk to you about today, so I hope you take away something, and at the very least know that power and politics is not toxic, and it's not a bad word. And I'm going to teach you how to play a game on just a few things that I learned in corporate. So, let's go to the next slide. We talk a lot about merit. We talk about fairness, especially in this country, about processes, but if we are truly honest, a lot of decisions, especially the important ones, they get made in a pre-meeting before the meeting. And so they aren't made in the room. What happens in the room in the meetings is where decisions are ratified. It's just confirming what decisions were already made. And these decisions happens over WhatsApp, over a glass of whiskey, over that golf game. Right? It's a casual hallway conversations, the water cooler talks, that isn't on the calendar. And so that's why the best ideas don't always win. And it's why some people are always in the loop and some are not. And if you find yourself walking into a meeting and going, sounds like decisions are already made, you are probably right. And that's not dysfunction, it's just politics. And some people avoid politics because you think it makes you principled. But what it does is that it makes you powerless. And so most people think politics is toxic, right? It's gossip, it's favoritism, it's backstabbing. But what I've learned about politics in the workplace is that it is the invisible operating system that runs every single organization, no matter its size. And it's actually about how things get done, through whom and why. So if you understand workplace politics, you're going to know a few things. You'll understand that it's not manipulation. It's about being smart, about power. And if you're not part of that dynamic, your voice is late and your seat is conditional. So in my opinion, politics isn't optional, but it is very navigable. And what I'm going to show you is some stories about who influences leadership behind the room, whose opinion might quietly carry weight, and who gets heard even before the meeting starts. So here's my definition of workplace politics. is the unwritten rules of how to get what done through whom. It's as simple as that. How to get what done through whom, and it's unwritten rules. It's not in your onboarding when you join a company. Okay? So, most of us are taught to choose formal power, which is what you see on the left side of the slide. These are very obvious. These are people who carry the title, they're on your org charts, they have authority, etc. But what I've seen again and again is what you see in the middle and on the right side, relational and perceived power. Let me break it down for you. So relational power, it moves decisions before the meetings happen. And perceived power, these are people that are trusted, they get the extra airtime, and they get credit, whether or not you think they've earned it. And so you don't need all three to be effective. But if you're only playing on the left side of the slide, which is the formal power, you're probably being outmaneuvered by someone who is making use of at least one of the other buckets. And so if you've ever watched someone get promoted and then you thought to yourself, how? This is the answer. This slide is the answer to that. Every company has two org charts. The official one that you find on the intranet. And then there is the real one. The one that people don't talk about, but it is the operating system and where everyone operates within. I call that the shadow organization. And it's made up of informal influence. And it's actually how power flows. So if you're not mapping this, you're probably spending too much time impressing the wrong people. Let me tell you a story about the shadow organization. I was once on a global call, and it was a pre-earnings call. And there's about 100 people on the call. It's a typical call where I present the numbers for the region. And there was a person on the call that typically doesn't show up very clearly on the formal org chart, but is usually inside these meetings. And so on one part of the business, this guy asked me a question. Why is it that Asia Pacific and Japan is always struggling and doesn't have the same amount of market share for business through these partners as we do in Americas and EMEA? And instead of answering that question, I asked a question back. And so one of the moves is that instead of being in defense, you can get into offense by asking a good question. And so I said, why do we think that it's good to have 40% of our business going through one partner? And so this guy didn't have the answer to that question. Now, I won the moment, but politically, I needed to repair this relationship because I potentially embarrassed him in front of 100 people. So, what did I do? I had to repair the relationship, and I pinged my team, and I said, anything this guy wants from us, data, decks, whatever, give it to him in high speed. And then I knew I was going to see him in Chicago for our global meeting, and I bought him a drink, we talked, and we neutralized it. So it's really okay to have moves like that, but then you have to understand the impact of it. So you're probably wondering why I'm telling you this story, which is on the next slide. There are 4 things about it that illustrates the shadow organization. Firstly, this is not a person that shows up in my direct flow of power, but this person, although doesn't control resources, is someone that people with resources listen to. And so resources are budgets, people, etc. And so this person is more junior than me, but it's a person that sits in the shadow organization. The second thing is that while I won the moment, I needed to repair the relationship. So I had to find a way to protect the relationship because this is an important person. And so power flows move in very different ways. And it's so important that we pay attention to it so you can win the moment. But I always say protect the relationship and play the long game, because you don't want to just go around pissing people off unnecessarily. And so what you see here are the 4 things that illustrates the shadow organization. And I hope, maybe it triggers a story for you. Now, when it comes to politics, I believe there's a values compass, which is the next slide. And here are 3 that I always think about when I make decisions. And I think every leader needs a values compass, because not all politics are worth playing. And so here's how I break it down. The green zone, this is where you build influence with integrity. So you speak up when something is not right, especially in your line of work. You align your work to a bigger picture. The gray zone is very tricky but navigable. This is where maybe you say yes to a special project, not because you want to do it, but you know that by doing that special project, you're going to get visibility with the right people. And it helps you to build political capital. And then there's the red zone. This is where you lose yourself. And you do things like undermining other people, you weaponize information, you do whatever it takes, basically. And for me, that's not politics. That's self-sabotage with promotion in disguise. And so the goal isn't to avoid all politics. It's just to understand where is your line and to stay on the right side of it. Let me tell you a story about navigating the gray zone. And this happens at the most senior levels. We're 3 days out from closing the quarter. And I walk into the forecast call, 12 o'clock, Wednesday. We're closing the quarter Friday midnight. And while we wait for all the regions to dial in, I glance up to look at the screen, and I saw that our numbers had gone up. So I look at my boss, and I said, "Did you increase the forecast?" And he said, "Yes, I just got back from Japan, and the Japanese GM said, this deal's gonna come through." And so I look at him and I said, "It's not gonna happen." And we said, "Let's wait for the Japanese GM to dial in." So we wait for him to dial in. And he comes on and he says, "Yeah, the PO's with the partner. I think it will happen, so I'm happy to keep the number there." But I knew the internal processes with the partner, and it's not going to close fast enough. So I said I would double check and that I would come back. And I came back in writing to a lot of people and confirmed the deal's not going to happen on time for us to book for that quarter. So we had to take the number down. Now, if you run sales, you know that taking a number down 2 days before the quarter ends is never a good thing, and it was a very big number. And there's this typical email that goes out before we close the books. It's a pre-earnings email from the senior leadership. So it goes out, and there's like hundreds of people on it. And it talks about the performance of the region. And of course, we had to address that we missed our number because we missed this deal. And the Japanese GM wasn't going to take the hit, so I did. I took responsibility, not because I caused it, but because I understood the system. Because when you play politics, being right isn't always enough. And my team wasn't happy, but leadership isn't about keeping everybody happy. And it's about knowing when to speak, when to fight, when to take the hit, and how do you keep real power staying in motion. And you just have to trust that the most senior people, they know the truth. So that's a judgment that I decided to make. And for me, that's a great lesson of navigating the gray zone. And it was more important to me that I was playing the longer game, and that means absorbing short-term hit. So here are 3 moves I'd love to leave you with. For every leader that I have worked with, this has changed the game for me. First, the pre-meet, the meeting before the meeting. If a decision matters to you, there is always a meeting that needs to happen before the meeting. So have the side conversations early so that your idea or whatever you're proposing, a decision that needs to be made, isn't a surprise. It just becomes a formality at the meeting that everybody is nodding their head and they move on. Second is to ask power questions. Influence isn't always about speaking more. It's about asking the right questions at the right time, and this, for me, is one of the most powerful things to do. In fact, I think in the 21st century, the most underrated skill is being a good questionologist. And third, visibility isn't vanity. So make your wins visible, but tie them to the business. I think you heard it on the panel earlier. Now, people remember moves, what moves the needle. They don't just remember what you did, what was the execution. So my point is that you don't really need to change who you are, you just need to understand the game that's being played. So here's the truth. Power doesn't always sit with the smartest voice or the best idea. It sits with the person that knows how the game is being played and plays it without losing who they are. You don't have to be political, but you do have to be savvy. This is my favorite quote, well, second favorite. Traditional power actually sits with, traditional power sits in titles, but real power sits in agency. And the definition of agency is everything I just talked about today, that you don't have to play dirty, that it is actually in your hands. Now, you can choose to play or not play, but you then cannot blame the system or your leaders that you are not moving forward in the company, because the game is there, either you choose to see it or not. So play smart and intentionally. Now, I had 20 minutes to tell you about 31 years of studying power and politics, so I didn't get to tell you everything. But everything else can be found in my course, From Outsider to Insider, Master Workplace Politics. I double-click on 8 insider intels, and just for this conference, up to Sunday night, I'm going to give you my deck. I'm going to give you the double-click on the 3 moves. I'm going to give you a set of questions that I have tried and tested myself. I'm going to give you word-for-word scripts and 5 insights that I didn't get to say on stage. And if you want more, you can find me on YouTube. And I post a video almost every day on all sorts of topics. So if you want to get there, there's a whole channel I have on workplace politics that you can follow. That's on YouTube, Raw with Uma. So I'll leave you with this. Being powerful is like a lady. And if you have to tell people you are, you aren't. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much, Emma. Please say a big clap of applause.
Hi, how are you?
Good to see you.
You too.
Yeah, thank you so much for putting it
Yeah,
down.
you're welcome.
Thank you, thank you.
Should I give this to you? No,
I'll hold it.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
So you can
Thank you.
tell that there's a lot of cameras on the wall right now. This is very, very impressive. I think one of the things that we really want to highlight is that
Thank you.
her speech
Thanks
is
so
so
much.
unconventional. It's pretty, thank you so much.
Thank
for
you.
your time. It's very hard to find, a speaker
Thanks so
that's
much.
daring to put herself
Yeah,
out
I
forward
wanna
and
tell you
share
about
about, very relatable things